What's up, everybody? Welcome to another great episode. On this week's episode, we have Kristi Miller, and she shares the steps that she took to literally leave corporate America, how she literally had a moment in her mind where she said, man, I got to make a complete shift. I've answered no to too many questions that are important, and what that meant for her, her life, the direction she took, and so many other things. I think you're going to really, really, really like this episode. So let's dive in and hear what she has to say. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another great episode of the Gooyow Now Show. I am, of course, as always, and yet again, or all three, I suppose, your host, Bob McIntosh. And I'm excited today because we actually have something on that I've known for, God, a hot minute. I don't know. It's been a while.
A long time. You might age yourself if you actually say how long, Bob. You might age yourself here.
We'll leave that aside. A long time. We'll just leave it at that. And and she's a marketing badass. I've watched her journey through a number of different things to what she's doing now. And I don't want to spoil her story because I think it's going to be very important to what we want to talk about on today's show. But I'm very, very excited for her to be here. She's not only a badass entrepreneur, she's a badass marketer. And I'm just excited for her to be here and ask some questions and dive into getting out of her own way. So Kristi, thank you for being here.
My absolute pleasure, Bob. Anytime I get to spend with you is time well spent. So
I feel the same about myself.
So I love you. One of the many reasons why I love you.
Perfect. Cool. So for those people who don't know anything about you, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing now, and sort of kind of how you got there, and then we'll dive into it from there.
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. Great to meet everyone virtually. As Bob said, my name's Kristi Miller. Right now, I own a company called Recalibrate 360. And basically, we are an NLP training and breakthrough coaching company. So we essentially help people get out of their own way, find the programming that's going on there that's not working for them, and change it, start living a life they really want. So
perfect. So for those who don't know, what is NLP? I know, and I think a lot of folks do, but just in case they don't.
You know, it's actually one of my favorite questions to get because any of you that have studied NLP before, which is Neuro-Linguistic Programming, it is like so highly jargonized. It's like the submodalities that are working inside your mind. And basically for us, what it really comes down to is the set of programs that are running your life. A lot of times people look at, like, one of the reasons that I think people find NLP is because it's like they know, they can see in their life what's not working. Like, we ask people all the time, you know, how many of you know that there's more for your life than you're currently living? And it's like every single person raises their hand. So it's like people know that they have.
If you're watching or listening right now, raise your hand. We know.
Little hands, right? It's like, so people know that there's more for their life. And oftentimes what it comes down to is like, what are the blind spots that we're not able to see that are actually producing the results? And kind of how do we go in there and start changing that stuff?
Perfect. And so this is interesting because when a lot of people think about NLP, they think about, you know, language patterns and specific things, which is part of it, but it's not a holistic view of the whole thing. And that's what's, to me, is very fascinating about what you're doing, is that you're tackling a different facet of NLP than what most people think about when they think about it. And I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because most people find their way to our trainings looking for exactly what you're talking about, right? Like, how do I master communication? How do I become more influential? How do I become more persuasive? And then you kind of get in there. That's kind of like the toe that opens the door to a whole lot more of what the body of work really is. And it is all that and more. So.
Perfect. So before we get there, let's take a step back, because I know you had, you know, sort of a great job and then transitioned into this. I don't know if by choice or by force, or, you know, maybe a little bit of both. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, because I think that story and journey is going to be important for a lot of folks.
Yeah, I think I found myself where many people find themselves, which is, you know, you get comfortable in your daily grind of whatever you're doing. You know, I worked for an amazing company and I had been there for, gosh, over 10 years. I think it was 11 or 12 years. And that's how we met. So I was the director of marketing for an amazing company. And it got to the point where I really felt like I had climbed the mountain. You know, like I had done all that there was to do and I was doing it well. And, you know, then it's like that little voice starts creeping in. Like,
Right.
it starts with this little itch of like, wow, I used to love doing this. I used to love being here. Like, this is weird. Why am I not loving this like I used to? And that like little nag in that voice becomes louder and louder and louder until it's kind of screaming in your ear. But I know for me, it was like, I had really built my life around being the director of marketing for this organization, right? It was my master status in my life. All my friends, like I really considered the people that I worked with to be my family. So it wasn't just about making the jump of leaving a job per se. It was really like, wow, am I going to step outside of everything that I know? And also, like, the thing that I see so many people that are stepping into entrepreneurship, it's like, for me, I was making a 6-figure income. I was at the top of my game. And I think part of it for me was also a sense of guilt, right? It's like you look to your left. I remember waking up every morning and I would be like, oh, like, just kind of this feeling of, let's just say, not being 100% motivated to go do what you're supposed to do. And I remember thinking to myself, like, every morning, man, there's so many people that would kill to have my life.
Right.
So why am I not? Why is it not enough for me? But it just got to the point for me. This was probably like 1.5 years of just this kind of like voice that was getting louder and louder. And I remember, there's always like that one thing that pushes you over the edge. For some people, it's like, fuck this shit. Sorry, I'm not sure if I can swear here.
Totally good. Totally
like,
good.
Fuck this, I'm out. Like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You're cool. I'm out. Mine wasn't that aggressive. Yeah, bye. But for me, I remember I was in a yoga class and the woman who was leading the yoga class, like, you're down in child's pose and you're in this meditative state. And she asked the question, who are you serving in your life? And for me, it still gives me the chills to even talk about today. I went inside, I was like, am I serving people? And it was like, yes, I am serving people, but am I serving my people? Like the people that are out there waiting, for me to step into my gifts and my calling. And it was like, no. And I was like, okay, am I serving myself? Hell no. I was miserable. Right. And then the third for me was, am I serving God? And when I really thought about it, I was like, am I living God's calling for my life? And it was like, no, no, no. And I just internally, for me, that was it. Like the decision was made. And I was at peace with it, so it was still a crazy transition to step out of good to go into this like crazy unknown, because I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life when I grew up, and that just kind of like started the search for me, and ultimately led me to NLP and what I'm doing now.
So let me ask you this: when you're in this yoga class, you're in child's pose. Which, side note, I'm like, oh, yoga. I had like literally just like a side note. I was 2 months into my yoga practice, just getting started with it, and COVID happened, and I was like,
I feel you.
And I just like, it's just not the same. I was doing hot yoga and I was like, I love it. But now like you can't go there. And I tried to do it at home and like I still, I did it for a little while, but it's not the same. And I'm still like, although I am in Texas now and I just want to.
I know, I was going to say, you already know I'm jealous because Texas is totally open right now. We've already had these conversations where I'm getting FOMO of the concert videos you're sending me,
But anyways, okay. So you're there, you're in child's pose, you start asking yourself these questions. And I guess, so two questions about this. First is, you got asked this one question. Do you think you would have found the questions that you asked yourself, those 3 questions that you answered no to, without that prompting? Or, do you feel like
that's a great
you were going to find this no matter what, because you're already feeling this way. It was just the impetus that got you there.
Yeah, it was going to be at some point in time, it was going to be the straw that broke the camel's back.
It just depends on which one.
Okay. It does. And, I'm just the type of person where if I continue to play that picture down and I hadn't made the decision, ultimately I would have become more miserable, which would have affected everyone else. And it just would have been this downward spiral. Right. So it's just like, okay, I can make a decision that's good for me and I can choose to exit in the most gracious way possible of just like, whatever you need, I'll be here for 3 months, never going to not support the organization, but, you know, just do so in a way where I felt good about how I was leaving, instead of getting to the point where it needed to be kind of a deuces moment, or like get kicked the hell out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Or get fired because everyone else can see it except for you or whatever.
Exactly.
So okay, so then the second part of this question is, you start making the decision, and you said, hey, like you had no idea what you were jumping into, and I would argue that a lot of folks who are listening to this may already think they found the thing, and because I was the same way, where I was like, oh, this is my thing, and then since have found, oh, it actually led me to my next thing. But with that said, what was going through your mind at the time to say, hey, I don't have something else. I don't have, because people tell you all the time, oh, keep working until you've replaced your income. And
right.
For me, I know I tried to do that for a long time, and I realized that I was never going to get to a point where I replaced my income, because there was always something else that kept coming in. And I'm going to make a guess here that you're the same way, in which I gave way too much over here to ever be able to give what I needed to here to make that work. And so,
100%.
but I think a lot of folks find themselves in that. So what was going through your mind at that point in time to make that jump?
I mean, for me, I had been preparing, you know what I mean? Just like financially making sure that I had reserves so that I could make that decision if and when the time came. But in the same breath, it's like, it's so funny. I'm going to say burn the boats. And like, I was in front of a training. I said, just burn all the bridges. And I was like, no. Don't burn bridges. Hold on. Reset. I'm talking about burning the boats. I just felt like you and I are similar in this way. It's like, whatever I'm doing, I'm going to give 100%.
Right.
I'm built that I'm not capable of going halfway in or
phoning it in.
No, I'm just not. Like, whatever I'm going to do 100%. So it's just like, I knew enough to know that there was something more, even though I didn't know what it is. And for me, it just came down to like having a plan in my mind, which is probably different than what most people would do, which is like, oh, I'm going to leave my job. How am I going to replace my income? My mindset was the total opposite. I was like, I'm forcing myself. Now, mind you, I'm a doer by nature.
Right.
It's hard for me to sit fucking still. You know what I mean? So it was almost, it was like the opposite for me. I was like, you know what? I'm giving myself 6 months. And my rule was no shiny balls. Like, I know that sounds like crazy to say, but I was like, whatever I do next, it's going to be the thing that like lights me up, not just that I can do or that's fun to do, because, especially with marketing, like everybody needs a great marketer, period, end of sentence. It is frankly like, it would not have been difficult for me to go find another job or start freelancing, which, trust me, was appealing. Like once people found out that I was available, of like getting the calls of like, hey, can you come do this? And I was just like, you know what? Like, I want to give myself the gift of grace and like space to search. So there were probably maybe 3 weeks, my husband would say like, this was probably the max I've ever sat still in my life, where I just like chilled. I was just like, all right, I'm going to sit on the couch. I'm going to see what this feels like. And then I was like, no.
It's so like, it's good for like a week, maybe 10 days, like maybe. And then you're like looking around like, okay, now what?
Yeah. But like similar to you, we own a family-owned real estate business in Connecticut. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to jump in. Like, I'll start shifting I'll contribute. I'll get that business built up. And I did do that for like 6 months, but like same as you, I really forced myself to continually do a check of like, is this lighting me up? Is this lighting me up? And the answer was no. So it was kind of like that for me before going into like an NLP practitioner training and learning what was really going on. Like that was a discipline for me of just saying, okay, if this isn't it, I'm going to stop.
Right.
Which is like, okay, well, what do you mean? You're just going to like stop? But how do I know?
The brakes.
Right. But it's like you can't search and be on a path, in my mind, at the same time. Not to say that a path won't lead you closer to where you want to go, but like for me, I just knew that I needed I needed to explore. And I don't think that enough people give themselves the ability. Like I work with so many clients and students that it's like they jump from one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing, thinking like, oh, well, this will be the thing. This will be the thing. This company will be different. This, I could put my skill set here. And I think it's like, again, like there's so much that we all can do. What do you want to do? What do you want?
What do you want to do versus can do?
Right. And it seems like the simplest question, but I will tell you, Bob, like the funniest thing is, so like when we talk about NLP, we look at it this way, like ultimately changing your life comes down to three things: discovering what you actually do want, figuring out what it is that's been holding you back, and then finding the tools to equip you to change those things and actually go out there and get what you want. But the crazy thing about it is, like, when you ask people, what do you want? What you'll find 99% of the time is they'll tell you all the things. Here's what it sounds like. Well, I know I don't want to work in a cubicle anymore. And I know I don't want to sit on these Zoom calls, and I don't want to be here 9 to 5. And I don't want to keep dating these jerks. And it's like, people are so apt to tell you all the things that they don't want, but you're like, okay, great. What is it that you do want? Oftentimes it's like this deer in headlight look, right? They're like, oh, well, I don't know,
It's funny you say that. I was at a training with a guy named Philip McKernan, and there was someone that was doing the same thing. I was like, well, I don't know. He's like, what do you want? And they're like, well, I don't know. He's like, well, if you didn't know, what would it be? Well, I don't know. But if you did know, what would it be? And he just kept asking that. And so finally the guy got so pissed off, he like yelled an answer. And he's like, look at that. You did know. And he's like, the guy was like shocked. He was like, where did that come from? And it's like, sometimes you have to keep asking until eventually your mental barrier breaks down and you just spit something out and you realize, oh, that was there all along. I just didn't necessarily realize it was, because our minds play tricks on us.
Or it's like, what held you back from even saying it out loud?
Like fear or something like that of saying
it. Or it's like, okay, if I say this out loud, like I remember I went through an NLP training like 10 years ago, and then went through another one maybe 4 or so years ago, which kind of led me on this path. But I remember sitting through the first day of it, and like, I didn't know a lot, but I knew enough to know like this was it. And I remember I was texting my best friend and my co-trainer now, Nathan, and I was like, okay, hey, he's like, how's day one? And I was like, okay, well, I decided like this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. I'm going to open an NLP training organization. I want to speak, and like, that's what I'm going to do. But even now I can feel my face like getting flushed saying it, because it's like the second that you put it out into the world, that makes it fact. And so anything that you're doing that's not leading you to the thing that you said that you want, you now know inside, like you're not going in the direction you want to go. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's interesting. I love it, because it's similar to I had Dave Meltzer on. He's like, look, the moment that you say something or you put it out that you're going to do something, it goes from 0 to a possibility, which makes it infinitely more likely to actually happen, no matter what or how long it takes. And it's very, very true.
And once you say it, you can't undo it. It's like, oh, I don't know what I want. I don't know what I want. But the second that you speak it into existence, like that's now the new guiding light. And you can't like shut that door anymore. It's like, damn, that is what I really want. But then it leads to the second question. Well, how am I going to do that? Because it's like, I think where so many people get stuck is it's like the curse of being realistic. Right. It's like, well,
the million things that can't work.
All of it. But if you think about it, like, of whatever it is that you want in life, of course it's not realistic. You haven't created it in reality yet. Because if you keep doing what is realistic, you'll keep creating the same reality, which isn't what we want. Makes sense? So it's like breaking the frame of what's realistic to shifting to, well, what is possible? And I love what you just said. It's like, it's like the shift from like, why can't I do this to like, how can I? Because the reality is like, whatever it is that you want to do, somebody on the face of the planet is going to go do that thing. So why not you?
Why not you?
But I'm
So did you,
curious for you, what was the shift for you when you left and went into one thing and then had the epiphany that that wasn't it?
I've had two shifts. The first one was very similar to yours, where it's just, I mean, shoot, I was making, I was like 27, making like, over 100 grand. I'm like, oh, this is,
That's
not
nice.
bad. Like the path is there for success and everything, like all of that was there. But I remember, I'd read 4 Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And it was really funny. I was in this like small little, it was a bigger company, but we started a small office in LA. And so I just started like giving my team members more and more of my work, like literally all of my work, until finally they would push back. And I had like we were chock full of overachievers. So like, yeah, I'll take that. So all of a sudden I'm working like what should be 40 hours at the client. I'm booking like actually like 15 maybe. And like start working on my other thing. And all of a sudden I was like, why am I doing this? Yeah. And it was like that sense of like, oh God, I have to keep doing it. I remember there was one time, the sort of like the last straw was I had supposed to fly to this client on Monday morning. And I woke up with my alarm at like, I don't know, 4:45 a.m. to get this early flight. And I was just like, I'm not going. I literally I faked an illness and said, I'm not going. And I was like, if I'm faking an illness to get out of this
Something's got to change here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the other time was straight up misalignment of values. So, and it wasn't always that way, but it got to a point where, there was an integrity issue. And I said, look, I can't get behind this because it doesn't make sense anymore. And the company was like, no, this is what's going to happen. And I was like, okay, well, that's just not going to happen for me. And I wish you all the best of luck. You do you, it's your company, you roll how you want to roll. But for me, that's just not how I can operate. And yeah, so that was that. But in both cases, I remember people being like, wait, why don't you just keep doing whatever you were doing, whatever this next thing is? Why don't you keep doing that? So I'm curious for you, was there haters? Was there people that like, no, that's stupid, you shouldn't do that? And if so, how did you work through that? How did you overcome that for you?
That's a great question. I'm a big advocate of like, let's not make the same mistake twice. I felt like it's interesting because marketing is my background, my baby, I could eat, sleep, breathe it. But I also was like, all right, but that's also the thing that I was doing when I didn't want to do it anymore. Right. So I just kind of put that in a box and was like, all right, I'm going to go a new direction, whatever that direction is. But I think what's interesting about that is like, truth is truth is truth is truth. Meaning it's like, even though like starting an NLP organization, which is like, okay, mindset and communication and all this stuff, like, frankly, I just freaking loved it. And right. It's like, if you love something that much, frankly, I don't give a fuck what anybody else has to say about that. And
perfect. And your conviction, because you love it. And I think that's a huge thing. Sorry, I want to just interrupt because to me, that's huge, right? People, when they succumb to the haters, it's because they don't have a conviction behind their decision. At least that's my take on it.
Yeah. And here's the reality. You're going to be judged. Like that just, like, I forget who I was reading that said this, but it's something that I literally think about every morning, which is like, you're either going to be judged or you're going to be ignored. So every day when you wake up, it's a conscious decision of like, okay, like, am I going to step into the fullness of my life and risk being judged? Or am I going to crawl back under a rock out of fear of judgment and, and ultimately be ignored? Which, like, for me, like, one of the things that I think comes up a lot and certainly came up for me in the beginning is imposter syndrome. Right? Because it's like, okay, the whole world knows me as the marketer. that's who and what I am. So how am I going to step into this totally new field and be an expert in this field? And like, what is everybody else going to think? Like, how am I going to earn the credibility to do that? You know what I'm saying?
I 100% do, because I remember when I heard you were doing that, I was like, wait, she's doing NLP?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. I mean, like, hey, like, I was like, you do you, boo. I didn't know you were into that thing. And then like, I've watched you over the last 2 years, like just own it. And I'm like, hell yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, to your point, I think there's just a conviction that needs to go along with it, because it's like, ultimately, I think if you allow imposter syndrome to basically like undo you, you know, or keep you hidden, ultimately it's selfish, because there are people out there that are waiting for you and waiting for your message. So it's like, am I going to let my own shit inside my head, which by the way, is one of the reasons I love teaching what we teach, because it teaches you how to get rid of that, you know? So it's like for me, if I wake up in the morning and there's a limiting belief going on in my mind, then I do timeline therapy and I get rid of that. If it's like an issue of not having motivation, I fire an anchor, which is one of the reasons that I love this body of work, because it's tactical tools. It's not just one of the things that pisses me off, actually, while we're on the subject.
What
Really
grinds your gears? Let's talk about it.
here's what gets me. It's like, we're living in such a bullshit society right now, meaning there's just facades everywhere. Like, you see this guru going on a Facebook Live that it's like, you know, positive thinking and like motivation, all that shit. And then they get off the video and they're like crying in the corner, whatever. So it's like, I think that the society, one of the things that like really irks me is this shift towards positive thinking, right? Which is basically saying, whatever's going on in your world and whatever's actually going on in your mind, just override that and pretend that everything is great, which ultimately it's like, that is so incongruent. And that's why so many people spend so much time. It's like, you see someone who's struggling with anger, right? Like, they're just angry or frustrated all the time, but they've taught themselves how to basically control the anger.
Right.
Well, like that shit's still in there. You know what I mean? You've just learned how to put a mask on for it. Wouldn't it be better to actually get to the root and get rid of it, so you actually just don't have to feel that way? Right. And to me, that's the biggest difference in actually having tools and techniques, rather than just trying to like poly positive yourself into being fake. Right. You know what I mean? Like those memes that are like, every day is not good, but there's good in every day. It's like, in the moment you're like, true. But at the end of the day, like, when you're in a critical moment, are you going to take that meme out of your pocket and be like, oh, well, everything's hitting the fan right now, but there's
good.
Yeah.
I used to always teach it at my event. I was like, look, inspirational quotes are fantastic, and it's fine to share them on occasion. But those folks that you see sharing them like 3 times a day, it's because they're not following them.
Correct.
So they have to keep posting them.
Correct. And it's like, who are you doing this for? You know what I mean? Right. It's so true. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, Bob, I think all of it just comes down to a conviction to follow your truth.
Interesting. And so what advice would you give to someone who maybe feels like they're not following their truth right now, or is questioning, and maybe had their truth, right? Because I feel like for you too, it was like, hey, this wasn't like I hated this all along. It was like, no, this is great for a long time. It wasn't until the very end that it wasn't in alignment anymore. So what advice would you give to someone who's either questioning their current truth, or, feels like they've totally lost with their truth?
Yeah. One, go through an NLP training. Like, I wish there was for me to say, hey, this is just what you need to do, but it's really taking the time to figure out what programming is going on in your mind.
So I can't just like read a meme.
I mean, I would love to give you one. I can give you like 100 of them, but I think a couple of the things that have helped me, and I'm thinking of like, of a lot of our students and clients, is, even looking back at like my transition out of corporate America, and sounds like you had a similar exit, and kind of thinking is like, I think we get into a place of being like, what's wrong with the company? What's wrong with the group? Something's wrong over there. Or Is it, hey, whatever they're doing is perfectly fine. I've just outgrown it. And can that be okay? Because
Right.
I think that people forget sometimes that we as human beings, our whole, like, we are built for growth. So it's like, I remember people used to say to me all the time, like, when is enough going to be enough? When are you going to be satisfied? And the answer is never. Like, we're not built to just like sit like a monk on top of a mountain and meditate all day, although that's nice from time to time. It's like, we're built for growth. So it's like, I think just being okay, being honest with sometimes of like, even if this dynamic, this corporation was good for a long time, can you be okay with, I've just outgrown it and it's time for me to find whatever my next thing is. It doesn't mean that something is wrong with you or that something is wrong with whatever, the company, the organization, any of that stuff. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think that's very true. We want to associate, like, we don't want to take, it's almost scary that we've grown, and whatever environment we put ourselves in hasn't. And if we admit that we've grown and it hasn't, we also have to admit that we were the ones that chose to stay there through that, even if we're only just recognizing it now.
It's way easier to play the blame game than to just take responsibility and, have the courage to step out and find something new, do something new, let go of things that are no longer serving you. But I think one of the things that is the most difficult for people is like when that includes people, when you've outgrown people. So it's funny, as I was like thinking about today, just even the title of your podcast, How to Get Out of Your Own Way, so often it sounds cliche about, the people that you surround yourself with or who you become and all of that, but also just an awareness of like, who have you outgrown in your life? Doesn't make them bad and doesn't make you bad, just means it's an indicator for a time to make a change and level up,
Yeah, no, this is so true. And it's interesting when we look at that. It's interesting when we outgrow those folks, but then they realize it and then they come back around and then they step back in again because they're like, hey, I'm not going to be left behind over here.
Yeah, exactly.
That's also a
They're
fun
like,
thing too. It happens once in a while, not too often, but
but it's amazing when it does, right? It's amazing when it does. And I know, like, so oftentimes you hear like, you've changed, and it's like, yeah, that's the point. Changing
thank
is
you.
the freaking
I
point.
appreciate it.
Yeah, but I mean, to your point, it even like thinking back to like when I left corporate America, like that stepping into just a new thing. I think for anyone, for me, it was really important to feel grounded in what I was doing, like really earn the right and put in the work. You know what I'm saying? Before going out there, that's another thing that kind of like rubs me the wrong way is, I think you actually commented on a post that I wrote a few months ago, but it's like anybody can order a pop-up banner that says like nation's #1 performance coach. That doesn't mean that person has earned the right to be like going in there and doing that stuff, So it's like, I think just practicing what you preach with that,
Yep. I do think I remember that post because I believe you said just because Bob says he's the top, and I was like, whoa, hang on a second, hang on, time out.
I know, it's so funny. You will be so happy about this though, because it was actually a student who used the name Bob. Like, why are you asking Bob in the cubicle next to you for advice on starting your own business, right? But the funniest part about that was like, you and I have so many mutual friends, obviously, that like there were probably 12 people that jumped on that post and be like, okay, yes, except for Bob McIntosh. Like, Bob, that Bob is amazing.
That Bob's good.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was so funny because I thought about that before I even posted it. I almost texted you to be like, hey, just so you know, you're not the Bob that I'm talking about in my post today. It is.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. I love all this. So let me ask you this. You leave this corporate, you're like, okay, hey, I have this moment, I'm going to do this thing. You're like, I don't care what the haters say or any negativity people would say. And then you just have, has there been a moment in which you've questioned this decision that you've gone down, or said, hey, maybe this isn't the thing, but you're sticking with it just because you feel like you need to?
Yeah, about 120,000, which I think is called like hashtag entrepreneurship, right? Entrepreneurship is
Very
like,
true.
oh my gosh, today was amazing. And then the entire world seems like it's piling on, and you're like, what have I gotten myself into? Why am I doing this? But I think that's ultimately, it's like that 1%, it's like that 1% difference of just having the ability to move through it. Like the way out of all that shit in my model of the world has always been go right through it, because it's like the second that you back away, like it sure as shit isn't going to get any easier. You know what I'm saying? But hell yeah. And I mean, it's like, to your point, it's like all the people that I knew would be thinking like, wait a minute, what is Kristi doing now? Like, isn't she a marketer? Like, what does this look like? She's coaching, she's doing training. What is she certifying in? I just think that there's, like the gift in all of it for me, because now fast forward a few years, has been really getting to the point of being able to reflect back and like thank my past self for having the persistence and like strength of mindset to be able to move through those most difficult times. Because it's like in the type of training that we do, I mean, you see people change their entire life after spending 7 days with you. And I think about that a lot, of just like, wow, I look around, it gives me the chills to think about, but I look around and I'm looking at all of these lives that have been impacted. And had I made a different decision any step of the way, and like let that stuff or the pressure or the financial pressure, whatever it is, like if I had let that stop me on my path, how many other people wouldn't be empowered to like live their best life now, and like that,
Exactly.
that's all of it.
And it's cool to see the multiplication effect. Again, I feel like now we've talked about it twice, but Dave Meltzer always talks about he's on a mission to help 1,000 people, help 1,000 people, help 1,000 people, and that's 1 billion people in the world. And he knows he can't help 1 billion more than likely, at least directly, but I can help 1,000 people with even a single conversation in the right direction, and I can make that impact.
It's the ripple effect,
Always.
That's how you change the world, in my opinion.
Hey, it certainly doesn't hurt. That's for sure.
No, it doesn't. No.
Perfect. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I think, I've taken a lot away. And for all of you listening or watching this, if you're finding yourself in that, you're questioning that, because now having gone through it twice myself, and I've had conversations with a number of folks about this, and I have one person in mind right now, and you probably know who you are if you're listening to this, because I know you probably are. Keep asking yourself those questions. I think that's the right thing to do. And I think that the more important part is surrounding yourself as you're going through that with people who are going to support you in asking that question versus criticize you for thinking it. And I remember when I was doing this, like the first time, a lot of the people closest to me at the time were like, why would you do this? Like, why would you walk away from that much money? Why would you walk away from, this and this and this? And I was like, because I'm not happy. And this is an opportunity that I feel like, sure, I'm taking a massive pay cut. Sure, I'm not going to make as much. Sure, a million other reasons why I shouldn't do this. I said, but ultimately, this is where I feel like I need to go. Like I'm called in this direction. And that's more important than anything else. And I don't regret a single moment of that decision, despite the fact that it's led to numerous consequences for me, both in, marriage, life, finances, everything. Doesn't matter. I would choose the same thing over and over again, because I realized, hey, this was a calling for me to do the right thing for me. And that helps me impact people. So anyways, that's a little monologue to close this out.
I love that. And, when you do that, the money will follow.
Very true. Very true.
It's like I think just for everyone to be able to have the certainty that like you can have what you want, and that living a life of purpose and passion and having a profit like can be the same thing when you follow your truth and do it, unapologetically. So
100%. So if folks want to connect with you some more or reach out to you, how can they do that?
Sure. I know many people listening will be interested in learning more about one of our certification programs. You can go to iwantnlp.com. And those of you that are interested in learning more just in general or about coaching, breakthrough coaching, you can go to our website, which is Recalibrate360.com. So look forward to getting to know many of you. And thank you so much for having me on, Bob. Always a pleasure to spend some time with you.
It absolutely is. Always. As always, everyone, thank you for being on. Thank you for listening, watching, wherever you're consuming this content from. I appreciate you. If you could do me a favor, the one price, as we always say, for this podcast and video show is share it with a friend. Find someone who maybe they're questioning or they're looking for their truth, or maybe they had a conversation with you, or maybe they hinted that they were having that conversation in their head, and share this with them. I promise you that they will appreciate hearing it. I know they will, in fact. And as always, subscribe, rate, review, hit the like button, hit the notification button, click all the things, do all the stuff, because at the end of the day, we can't help more folks unless more folks see this, and your participation in that part helps us do that. So appreciate you as always. We'll see y'all on another episode next week.